If you ask a couple how much of the relationship workload each person is carrying, chances are you'll rarely hear 50% from either side. That's right. Sometimes equality in love doesn't quite mean everything's even. The idea that every relationship, especially between men and women, should always be a neat 50-50, equal effort, equal give and take. It sounds like the secret formula to a blissfully balanced duo. But let's be real. Does it actually pan out like that outside of our daydreams? Not quite. This neat concept, while pretty on paper, often crumples under the messy reality of everyday life. Let's zoom in on romantic relationships with a spark of attraction. Most women, if they're spilling the real tea, wouldn't blink twice at an uneven split if it swung in their favor. If a woman's partner, who makes her heart skip a beat, decides to foot all her bills, do you think she's going to wave that off just to hoist the flag of equality? Not a chance. She's not about to turn down a fairy tale budget to stick it out in the 9-to-5 grind for 4 decades. And honestly, can we blame her? This little peek behind the curtain shows us how real life often dances around the ideal of a 50-50 split. How often do you really see a relationship where everything is split down the middle? It's as rare as a unicorn turning up at a cat party. Sure, a 50-50 split sounds great in theory, but in practice, it's usually way messier. Take a look from the women's perspective. Imagine they're getting a sweet deal, like a 70-30 split. Cozy, right? But push for stark equality, and suddenly things aren't so warm and fuzzy. For many women, hitting that exact mark isn't just unlikely. It's the ceiling of what they're ready to invest or compromise in a partnership. Now, what about the guys? Ask 100 men how they'd like to divide the relationship responsibilities and finances, and you might hear a chorus of 50-50 as their rallying cry. Often, these same guys end up carrying a heavier load. It's not just about keeping things even. It's about the silent dynamics that play out behind closed doors. As Eddie Murphy famously said, "There is no romance without finance." It's not that love is all about transactions, but it does shine a light on a tricky truth. Men often end up footing a bigger bill, not just for equality, but for harmony and togetherness in their relationships. Why might equal splits in relationships not always be smooth sailing? Well, for a lot of guys, shooting for a 50-50 split is just their baseline. It's what they figure they ought to contribute. For many women, though, hitting the pure 50-50 mark feels like the upper limit, the most they believe they should have to put in. Sure, there are women who champion true equality, and men who are more than willing to go above and beyond, but they tend to be the rare birds. More commonly, women might hope for a comfy 80-20 in their favor, while many men stick to a firm 50-50. Imagine it's like selling a car. The price you settle on is the highest the buyer is willing to pay, and the lowest you're okay with taking. Not exactly the foundation for a joyful partnership, right? One side is always stretching too far or barely making do. The buyer might walk away feeling gouged, while the seller could end up quite happy, or just okay. Think about that tension playing out every day. You're in a constant state of negotiation. Who's doing what, who's paying for what, and who's sacrificing what, all in the name of keeping things even. That's a hefty load of pressure, isn't it? Day after day, trying to maintain this so-called fairness can turn into a battle of wills. It's exhausting and makes what should be cooperative teamwork feel more like an endless bout of haggling. If you know a friend, family member, or even a bro who could benefit from this knowledge, please share it with them. Not only does it show you care, but it could also spark a great discussion between you and them at your next gathering. Thanks for spreading the word. The idea of sticking to a rigid 50-50 split in relationships goes beyond just dividing up chores and bills. It really digs into how we feel about what we give versus what we get back. It's all wrapped up in the emotions and sometimes the sting of what we think we deserve versus what lands in our lap. Let's say a woman's used to having a partner who doesn't mind picking up more than his share of the tabs and tasks. If she moves into a relationship where everything's split straight down the middle, it might just rub her the wrong way. It's a bit like splurging on something at full price, feeling good about your purchase, and then seeing it on sale the next week. At first you felt savvy, but now you just feel like you've been had. And that sting of regret is real. This feeling seeps into relationships when you're always measuring up your deal against others. When a woman sees friends in more, let's say, financially generous relationships, her own even-Steven setup might start to look a bit drab. It's comparable to seeing an ad for a cheaper phone plan right after you've committed to a pricier one. Suddenly, your solid deal feels like a bit of a trap. All this comparison, this mental tally of could I be doing better, starts to weigh heavy. It makes sticking with the current situation feel tougher, as the grass looks endlessly greener elsewhere. What results? A relationship that feels more like a strict contract than a loving, supportive union. This relentless weighing and dissatisfaction can really drain the joy and life out of what's meant to be a supportive partnership. The nuanced issues of fairness and equality in relationships isn't about pushing for change or clinging to old ways. It's really about highlighting the realities these dynamics often unveil. For many women, reaching a 50-50 split in responsibilities and expenses feels like they're maxing out and pushing past that. That's a hard no. Meanwhile, lots of guys get that sometimes they need to pick up a bit more than half the load. This difference in outlook can brew quite the emotional storm. So, why is this a big deal? Because what looks equal on paper doesn't always feel fair in the heart. A strict 50-50 split might seem just right technically, but it often misses the mark on meeting deeper needs and expectations, which can leave the partnership feeling lopsided even when the math is perfect. It's that nagging feeling that you might be putting in more than your fair share that can really shake things up in a relationship. The truth is, making a relationship work with rigid equality isn't always practical. Stories from various couples reveal that relationships with a bit of a power tilt, especially those slightly favoring one partner, often work out better. In these setups, one partner taking on more of the grunt work might veer away from traditional ideas of equality, but it tends to feel more just. Here's the kicker. A relationship doesn't need to be perfectly balanced to feel fair. Often arrangements that feel just right, even if they're technically unequal, end up being more robust and fulfilling. At the end of the day, as long as the trade-offs, benefits versus responsibilities, are viewed as even-Steven by everyone involved, the relationship can maintain a sense of fairness. This goes to show why strict equality doesn't always equate to a blissful partnership. Does striving for 50-50 in relationships guarantee fairness, or does it complicate love? Share your experience below in the comments section.